Hello, so this wasn't really a planned video, but I think it's quite a topical issue right now, so I'll discuss it a little bit. I'm not going to go through all the ins and outs um, because homelessness, which is the main subject I'm going to talk about, is a very complex issue, and I frankly don't know everything. I don't know enough to make a very in-depth, comprehensive video, but I do want to discuss the report I've just read in today's, I should say yesterday's Times newspaper. This is the report, so you can see what I'm reading from. And basically, this is from the London Times. Homeless hero was a fraud who fooled an army veteran. I'm not going to read out the whole report, but it's quite lengthy. This guy, 38. In the UK, you can name someone after they have been. Begged for at least 6 months in Westchester-super-Mare, which is a seaside town in Somerset. And basically, he had done research on Irish regiment that had served in Iraq, and he had this very sentimental sign saying, "Ex-armed forces just need a little help. Council a waste of time. Please help. Thank you and God bless." And in one of his cover stories, he claimed that he'd come back from Iraq to see his wife in bed with another man. So he's clearly playing on people's emotions here, and apparently he racked up to £5,000 in doing this. One of those who sympathised with him was an actual serviceman who had been a sergeant in the Grenadier Guards. I'm just looking at the main points for this article, and he started an online campaign to raise money for this guy. He was sentenced. He got 16 weeks in prison, £85 costs, £80 victim surcharge, £25 in compensation to Mr. Heyman, and apparently he's got a record of alcohol and drug abuse. But I think the sentence is a little bit lenient. I would have given him a bit longer than that, because what he's done is fairly despicable. It's an insult to the armed forces, and it's also an insult to people who are genuinely homeless. This guy wasn't even homeless. Um, so that's the issue I want to talk about. I was just holding the laptop in that way in order to read the report. There has also been reports from Wolverhampton, which is a city in the Midlands, a city I studied in actually, so I know Wolverhampton well, of beggars who have been racking up a very large amount of money, or supposed beggars, and they're not even homeless. And it's actually making life for those who really are homeless harder. Now, I spent 2 years of my life in Wolverhampton, and that is a city that, at least when I was there from 2004 to 2006, seemed to have quite a serious problem with the homeless, much more so than Sunderland, where I am now. Um, there's some parts of the UK that seem to have quite a visible homeless problem, more so than others. Edinburgh does, London certainly does, Wolverhampton does. Um, different. This is one of those issues that is sort of left to the discretion of local councils as to how they go about it. Um, I'm someone that has always felt very passionately for helping people who are at the very margins of society, the most vulnerable people, and there could be few more vulnerable positions than being homeless. However, there has been an emergence of these reports of fraudsters playing on people's emotions to get money, and it's thoroughly despicable. In this particular case, it's despicable because he's pretending to be something he's not. He's insulting actual war veterans, men who have risked their lives. And I think it's just a disgrace that he would fraud the public out of money through good intentions. People see that they think, "Oh, this man's fought for his country," and it's just a very very selfish thing to do, and it's causing problems all around. It causes a perception that the government doesn't care. It causes a perception that all members of the armed forces end up like this. It causes a perception. Then of course it's going to cause a negative perception on homeless people, because people are going to not read the part that he wasn't homeless and think, "Oh, this is just tramps, frauding people." So I really would throw the book at this guy, and his drug and alcohol problem to me is an excuse. I've always taken the view with drugs and alcohol of giving people the support that they need. I appreciate that it is an illness. However, it's an illness that is is different from schizophrenia or other mental health problems insofar as it's a self-inflicted illness. So I do think there's a difference in that. But um, I won't- I'll be honest, I have walked past homeless people and given them change. More recently, I've tried to be more practical. I've sometimes bought them a hot drink. I've sometimes even suggested giving them like phone numbers for charities that I know could help them. Um, and sometimes have made excuses, or the thing is, it's very, very difficult to imagine what life is like if you've never been through that. But I know what I have some understanding of is that the way people end up homeless comes from a wide variety of reasons. Um, and it's very unfair to just say, oh, they're just lazy and they don't want to work and they've ended up that way. It is true to say that they're not all, some of them have done some pretty bad things and they have ended up in that position through very bad life choices. I spoke to someone who actually worked in a homeless shelter, and he said that one guy he spoke to, you know, beat up his girlfriend, his grandparents. He was basically a scumbag, and he ended up on the streets through bad life choices. But the danger is in assuming that all homeless people are the same. There have been examples of very successful people who their marriage has broken down, and one thing has led to another, and they've ended up that way. So you can't judge a homeless person any more than you can judge anyone else because you just don't know. I do think that cases like this are going to make the public more hard-hearted, and that's a pity because it means that people who really are homeless, who really are in a desperate situation, are not going to get sympathy, and we're going to become a harder society, and that's really not good. I mean, to be clear, I'm not saying, oh, just give them money and that's it. I believe in giving people the support mechanism to find stability in their life. Um, the principles of the big issue are very good, which is a magazine that gives them a sort of employment sense. I don't always like the approach the big issue has taken. I remember once buying a big issue and reading in the middle page, um, it was something like, oh, can you smell that stench? Maybe it's your own stuck up attitude. And I thought, whoa, 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 insulting the very people that buy the magazine. That so there's times that they have been. I don't like all I don't like the approach the magazine has always taken, but I've known a lot of big issue vendors personally, and they've been thoroughly decent people who are just trying to get by under very difficult circumstances. And when you get fraudsters, it makes life harder for them. Um, Having said that, the truth is there are people on the sidelines who may have a roof above their head, but they are struggling to get by. So homelessness isn't just about, having no roof above your head. There are people who are vulnerably housed, who are couch surfers, and I'm not saying this from a point of view of being very woolly minded and ultra liberal. I do think that people have responsibility for themselves, but as a society, we have to have compassion. Now, the problem is that compassion becomes compromised when you get the likes of this guy who are basically frauds. And it does make people think twice about generous acts. So from now on, I am going to start to change my approach. From now on, I think I'm not going to give any change to people who are begging. I'll buy them a drink, or I'll give them a phone number or an address for somewhere they can go. But because I do have some links to that sort of stuff, I don't like walking past someone in that situation. But there is another side to this. There are examples of people harassing elderly people on their own. Um, so we should be compassionate, but we should also be realize that in some cases these people have made, they have been responsible for the position that they're in. So we should be compassionate, but also not, compassionate enough to say that yes, we can give these people help to stabilize their own lives, but they also have responsibility. If they're being given help, they have to take it. Um, there are actually some people who would rather beg than get the support because maybe that support means taking some responsibility. so it's easier to just beg, and they can actually rake up quite a lot of money, especially in bigger cities or more touristic cities. So there is a lot of things to consider. And this sort of fraud happens all over the world. In China, it's a very big phenomenon. At first, when I first went there, I wasn't quite sure about the issues, and I thought, well, this seems a bit callous. People are just walking past these guys. You saw some things like basically tramps with no legs and stuff like this. But when you look a bit further into it, it's not quite as black and white. It's not that the Chinese are heartless. It's actually that a lot of these really are fraudulent cases. There will be examples of people who actually tuck their legs under their blanket and make it look like they're amputees. There will be people that get children to beg for them. There's all sorts of things that go on. Now, I have no doubt there are, again, people who are genuinely homeless in China, but China's still a developing country and it doesn't have a welfare state. So there is a sort of attitude in China, if you've got two arms and two legs, you can work. I think that attitude is a bit dismissive because if someone has mental health problems or other issues that could be affecting a homeless person, it's not that easy to get a job. And I had a very friendly discussion with a friend of mine about this. She said it's not about indifference, it's about if you have two arms and two legs, you can work. It's not quite that simple. Someone suffering serious mental health problems may not be a visceral problem. They may look strong and healthy, but there are complex issues involved. So societies generally, in my opinion, have to be compassionate. But compassion doesn't mean foolish, and it doesn't mean allowing fraudsters to get away with it. So yes, we need to be compassionate, but we need to be intelligent as well. I think it's a combination of both. And in this country, there's been far too many Tory councils who, in my opinion, have been downright callous, putting spikes outside buildings so people can't sleep, basically, and things like that. Westminster Council a few years ago was in hot water. It's Tory controlled council for basically saying that they'll move all their homeless people. And this is the thing: people may not like the sight of people begging, and I appreciate it can be considered harassment. But if they're not being given the support mechanism, then it's just kind of like tucking the problem under the carpet. Yes, there's responsibility involved, but when you're at absolute rock bottom, your confidence is going to be zero. So, we need to be understanding of that fact. And it's not all a case that these are ex criminals or people who are deserve to be where they are. In some cases, they've done nothing wrong. They just have fallen through the cracks through a variety of circumstances that have went wrong in their life. It happens. We are a stable country. We have a welfare state, but it's naive to assume that means that everyone will automatically get into a safety net. It doesn't work that way. So, people need to understand the issues, and this needs to be dealt with on a case to case basis. Um, so I feel very angry when certain, especially right wingers, take this callous disregard, like, oh, they deserve to be there, let's forget them. But the ultra left wing approach of, just giving them money or something is also naive. You need to provide facilities for these people to stabilize their own lives. And I know homeless people don't like, for example, being slandered as alcoholics and drug addicts. Many of them do face those problems, but, it is a rough, rough life. And put it this way, even if I think it even takes a certain amount of desperation to go to those efforts to fraud someone, to actually sleep rough just to get money. If it is despicable on one hand, but it also shows that they have zero self-respect, that they would actually go to that point of being so. I was in London around Leicester Square, and certainly the homeless in London must make a hell of a lot more than the homeless elsewhere because there's so many people go past, and they must get a significant amount of money. So maybe, good intentions can also be naive. Because if you see someone who looks like they're in a desperate situation, they're all rough, they've a scraggly beard, they've a mangy looking dog beside them, your human instinct is going to feel sorry for them. At least most people would. But when cases like this emerge, you just don't know. So from now on, I'm going to be very careful about this. I'm not going to ignore people, but at the same time, I think I'm going to do more practical things like either get them a hot drink. It's practical because they're outside, warms them up. It's a humane thing to do. Um, with money, you just don't know what they're going to do with it, and maybe that is a slander on them, but you just don't know. Um, let me know your thoughts on this subject.